In 1959, rescuers in the Ural Mountains found a tent that had been slashed open from the inside. Footprints led away into the freezing darkness left by hikers who were barefoot and barely dressed, but what they discovered next defied all logic. Some hikers had severe internal injuries, similar in force to what you might see in a high-impact accident, yet without significant external wounds. Others were found days later under deep snow in strange positions, wearing each other's clothes. 9 experienced adventurers, all dead in a way that science still cannot fully explain. What made them flee their tent into the fatal cold? To understand the Dyatlov Pass incident, we have to go back to the beginning. To who these hikers were, why they were there, and what happened on the final night of their journey. The Dyatlov group consisted of students and graduates from the Ural Polytechnic Institute. They were skilled mountaineers trained in winter survival, people who knew how to react under extreme conditions. Their leader was Igor Dyatlov. He chose a challenging route through the northern Ural Mountains, a region that was remote, silent, and brutally cold. Everything in their diaries showed a normal expedition. They laughed, took photos, and documented each step of the journey. Nothing indicated danger or stress. On February 1st, 1959, they made a fateful decision. Instead of moving into a forested area for shelter, they camped on the exposed slope of Kholat Syakhl, a mountain whose name translates to Dead Mountain. It was supposed to be just another night on the trail. But sometime after midnight, something forced all 9 hikers to abandon their tent immediately. They left behind boots, jackets, gloves, food, and essential survival gear. Whatever drove them out was sudden, unexpected, and powerful enough to override their training. The 9 hikers were not amateurs. They were students and graduates from the Ural Polytechnic Institute. The group included Igor Dyatlov, Zenaida Kolmogorova, Lyudmila Dubinina, and 6 others, all experienced winter climbers. Their goal was to earn the Soviet Union's highest mountaineering certification. Their diaries reflected a confident, well-prepared group. Nothing suggested internal conflict or fear. On the final day, the group began climbing Kholat Syakhl. Visibility was poor. Winds were strong. Temperatures were well below freezing. They unintentionally veered off their planned path. Instead of correcting course, Dyatlov chose to camp on the open slope, perhaps to avoid losing altitude, or perhaps due to low visibility. Their final diary entry was calm and routine. But this campsite decision would become central to the mystery. When search teams arrived weeks later, the tent was found partially collapsed and cut open from the inside. Inside were boots, jackets, gloves, cooking equipment, food, and personal belongings. Footprints, some barefoot, some in socks, and some lightly dressed, led away from the tent toward a forest. The tracks showed no signs of running or struggle. The hikers walked calmly into temperatures around -25 degrees Celsius. At the edge of the forest, under a cedar tree, the first 2 bodies were found, both lightly dressed. A small fire had been built nearby. Branches high above were broken, suggesting they tried climbing the tree, possibly to look for the tent or to gather dry wood. Along the path back toward the tent, 3 more bodies were discovered. Their positions indicated they were attempting to return. One of them had a minor skull fracture, not severe enough to be fatal on its own. When the snow melted in May, 4 more hikers were found in a ravine. These hikers had the most clothing, suggesting they took garments from those who died earlier. Their injuries were severe. One had a major skull fracture. 2 others had massive chest compression injuries. In some cases, soft tissue was missing due to prolonged water exposure. The force required for these injuries was significant, yet there were almost no external wounds. A few pieces of clothing had minor traces of radiation. This was an unusual detail, though the levels were low and not considered extraordinary. Clothing was exchanged logically for warmth. The footprints suggested a calm but urgent decision, not chaotic running. One possible explanation is a slab avalanche. This could explain sudden fear, cutting the tent, and fleeing quickly. However, problems remain. The slope was relatively shallow, the tent remained partially intact, there was no visible avalanche debris, and the injuries did not fully match typical avalanche victims. It explains the panic, but not the injuries. Another theory involves katabatic winds. These are sudden, powerful blasts of cold air that can create the illusion of immediate danger. This could explain the sudden escape and cutting the tent, but it does not explain the severe internal injuries, the ravine trauma, or the orderly footprints. Another possibility involves military parachute mines. A distant airborne explosion could theoretically cause pressure wave injuries without external wounds, similar to the internal trauma found on the ravine bodies. It could explain panic and fleeing. However, there were no confirmed military tests in the area, no blast marks, and no shrapnel or burns. Infrasound has also been proposed. Strong winds interacting with the mountain could generate low-frequency sound waves that cause anxiety, dizziness, and panic. This could explain the escape, but not the injuries or survival attempts. Modern investigators generally agree on several points. The hikers believed they were in danger. They fled urgently but not chaotically. They split into groups in an attempt to survive. The ravine injuries were likely caused by a fall or a snow collapse. There is no evidence of an attack or foul play. The deaths were caused by hypothermia and trauma. But what triggered it all remains the central mystery. The Dyatlov Pass incident remains unsolved. 9 trained hikers fled into the darkness without boots, jackets, or equipment. They attempted to survive in impossible conditions. Yet they died in ways that still do not form a complete picture. No single theory explains everything. Until new evidence is found, the final moments of the Dyatlov group will remain buried beneath the snow of the Ural Mountains. If you want more stories like this, deep dives into mysteries, history, and unexplained events, consider subscribing to the channel. Your support helps us continue creating detailed, well-researched videos. Thank you for watching. And until next time, stay curious.